I built our whole life with these hands, Jerem. And she's walking away from it without even looking back. You've made me feel invisible for years, she told me. I didn't know invisible could feel this heavy.
$45 billion, the lawyer said. And 6 cruise ships, including the one your wife just boarded.
They don't know whose ship this really is yet, but by the time we dock, everyone will.
If you've ever been made to feel small by someone who was supposed to love you, stay until the end of this video, because what happened to me on that dock changed my life forever. And if it resonates with you, hit like and subscribe. Because stories like this deserve to be heard. My name is David Whitfield. And 3 months ago, I was standing on a wooden pier in San Diego, holding a single duffel bag, watching my wife of 14 years walk up the gangway of the most luxurious cruise ship I had ever seen, with another man's hand resting on the small of her back. I want to tell you how I got there, because it started so quietly that I almost didn't notice my whole life unraveling. I was 51 years old and had spent the last 20 years as a maintenance supervisor for a mid-sized marina. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest, and it paid enough to keep a roof over our heads in a modest 2-bedroom house on Alder Street. My wife, Elaine, worked the front desk at a boutique hotel downtown. We met at 28, married at 37, and for a long time I thought we were happy. We didn't have children, something we both said we'd made peace with, and our life had settled into a routine of small comforts: Sunday pancakes, evening walks along the harbor, the occasional movie night. But over the last 2 years, something had shifted. Elaine started working later. She began dressing differently, new clothes I didn't recognize, a new perfume I didn't buy her. She'd disappear into the bathroom with her phone and lock the door. When I asked about it, she'd say I was being paranoid, that I didn't trust her, that I'd become boring. I told myself it was a phase. I told myself we'd find our way back to each other. I was wrong. Looking back now, I can point to 100 small warning signs I chose to ignore. The way she'd angle her phone away from me at dinner. The way she stopped asking about my day, then stopped asking anything at all. I told myself every marriage goes through quiet seasons, that 14 years together earned us the right to comfortable silence. I didn't understand yet that there's a difference between comfortable silence and the silence of someone who has already left in every way except physically. The truth came out on a Tuesday evening in April. I came home early from a job and found a hotel confirmation. Email open on our shared computer, a suite booked for 2. Under the name Marcus Reyes. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I did something I'm not proud of. I followed her the next time she said she was working late. I watched her get into a silver convertible outside a wine bar downtown. Watched a tall man in a linen suit lean over and kiss her before they drove off together. I sat in my truck in that parking lot for almost an hour, feeling something inside me quietly break. When I finally confronted her, she didn't cry or apologize. She looked almost relieved. "I've been trying to tell you for months," she said. "Marcus makes me feel alive again. You've made me feel invisible for years." She told me she was leaving, that Marcus had planned a farewell cruise for the 2 of them. A fresh start. And that by the time she got back, she wanted me to have moved my things out of the house. I didn't fight her on it. I didn't have the energy to. I drove her to the port myself, because some old stubborn part of me still couldn't let her walk away without saying goodbye. That's how I ended up on that pier, watching her climb the gangway of a ship called the Ocean Empress, laughing at something Marcus said. Never once looking back. I stood there long after the ship had pulled away, staring at the name painted along its hull in gold letters, feeling like the loneliest man in the world. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, a law office in Boston. The man on the other end introduced himself as Harold Whitcomb, executor of my late father's estate. My father, Thomas Whitfield, had died 6 years earlier. We'd been estranged for over a decade after a falling out I never fully understood. And I hadn't touched a cent of whatever he'd left me out of stubborn pride. Harold told me it was finally time to settle the estate because a clause in the will had matured. He asked if I could fly out immediately. Something in his voice told me this wasn't about a modest inheritance. What I learned in that Boston office rearranged everything I thought I knew about my life. My father, it turned out, had spent the last 30 years quietly building a maritime holding company through a series of shell corporations. Whitfield Maritime Group. He hadn't wanted the money to change me while he was alive, which was the reason for our falling out. He wanted to see if I could build something on my own first. The company he'd built was now valued at just over $45 billion. It owned ports, container fleets, and felt my stomach drop when Harold slid the document across the table. 6 luxury cruise liners, including the flagship of the fleet, the Ocean Empress. I sat in that lawyer's office in stunned silence, thinking about my wife laughing on the deck of a ship I apparently owned, sailing away from a marriage she thought had left her with nothing, unaware she was still, in the strangest way, standing on my property. I could have let it go. Part of me wanted to, but another part of me, the part that had spent 2 years being told he was invisible, wanted her and Marcus to understand exactly what they had walked away from, and exactly whose kindness they had spent years taking for granted. I had Harold arrange for me to board the Ocean Empress at its first port of call in Sedabio San Lucas, under a company credential that identified me only as an owner's representative doing a routine inspection. I wore a plain gray suit, no watch, no rings, nothing that would give away who I was. I walked those decks like a ghost, watching my wife sunbathe on a balcony suite that cost more per night than I used to earn in a month. Watching Marcus order champagne, like a man who had never once considered where the money for any of it truly came from. I didn't confront them right away. I spent 2 days learning the ship, meeting the captain, quietly reviewing the crew rosters and the guest manifest, letting the reality of my new position settle into my bones. And then, on the 3rd night, during the Empress's Sunset Gala, the ship's signature evening, with every guest gathered in the grand ballroom, I asked the captain for 5 minutes at the microphone. I still remember the shock on Elaine's face as I walked to that stage. I still remember Marcus's champagne glass frozen halfway to his lips. I introduced myself simply as the new majority owner of Whitfield Maritime Group, thanked the crew for their extraordinary work, and mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that I'd recently gone through a difficult divorce and wanted to personally thank the 2 guests in suite 4021 for reminding me exactly what kind of life and what kind of people I no longer wanted in it. I didn't need to say more. The whispers did the rest. By the time we docked in Los Angeles, Marcus had quietly disembarked at the next port under his own recognizance, unwilling to be anywhere near the scandal. Elaine tried 3 separate times to reach me, to apologize, to explain, to ask if there was any chance of starting over now that she knew who I really was. I didn't return a single call. In the weeks that followed, I learned things about my father I wished I'd known while he was alive. Harold showed me boxes of old letters my father had written but never sent, letters explaining that he'd cut me off financially not out of cruelty, but because he'd watched his own brother get swallowed by inherited wealth, and he wanted better for me. He'd apparently kept tabs on my life quietly for years through people at the marina, proud, in his own distant way, of the ordinary life I'd built with my own hands. Reading those letters didn't erase the years we'd lost, but it gave me something I hadn't expected: peace with a man I thought had simply stopped caring. I finalized our divorce 2 months later. I kept the house on Alder Street exactly as it was, but I don't live there anymore. I split my time now between the companies, Boston headquarters and a quiet cottage near the marina where I used to work, because some habits and some views You don't want to give up even when you can afford anything in the world. I still think sometimes about the man I was on that pier, watching the woman I loved disappear up a gangway without a backward glance. I don't feel triumphant about what happened after. Mostly, I feel grateful. Grateful that I found out who Elaine really was before I spent the rest of my life pretending not to notice. And grateful that my father, in his own stubborn and complicated way, had been quietly protecting a version of my future I didn't even know I needed. If there's one thing I'd want anyone watching this to take away, it's this: the people who make you feel small rarely deserve the credit for who you eventually become. Sometimes the ship you think has sailed without you was yours all along. Hold on to your worth, even when someone else refuses to see it, because eventually, the truth always finds its way back to the surface. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that their story isn't over yet.